Shabby from Project 39. I am having a lot of fun using the Meet Me in Wonderland paper pad and the clear stamps that came in the box of the month for February 2023 from the Not Too Shabby Shop. I want to show you some fabulous cards that I made, and I'm going to show you how I made them. So I loved the sentiments that came with this kit. Those who don't believe in magic will never find it. That is fabulous. This one that says, "I'm not crazy, my reality is just different from yours," a quote from the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. And this one, "It's no use going back to yesterday, I was a different person then," from Alice in Wonderland. So they're simple cards, and they took advantage of the fabulous quotes and sentiments from the stamp set. So I'm going to show you real quick how I made them. Alright, for the first project, I took a label die that I've had in my stash, and I cut on some of the paper, just an area that is pretty plain, doesn't have any writing on it or anything. And then I took that and inked around the edges with some walnut stain from Tim Holtz. And that just helped it pop up a little bit. You know, sometimes I'll put a second layer on, but if you don't feel like doing a second layer, another alternative is to ink around the edges, and it does help it have some definition. Now I took that whole piece of paper and put it down on my stamping platform. I taped it just to make sure it wasn't going to move anywhere. And I grabbed my stamp and centered it on that label. I used the brown ink, the same distress ink, just because black was a little bit too bold for it. And I made sure I got a good impression. And then again, I took it and inked around the edges. I cut some paper from the Meet Me in Wonderland 6x6 paper pad that came in the box of the month, and I inked around the edges of the paper as well. Again, I just wanted to have some definition to the paper. I grabbed some twine from my stash, went around the card a couple of times, used some double-sided adhesive, and then I used some ATG tape, pulled off the double-sided adhesive, and centered it on a card base. Now here I am inking again. I had inked it at one time and just realized it needed to be a little bit darker, so it again had that definition. And I added some dimensional adhesive on the back and centered it on the card. Well, I put it to the side and then realized, no, it needed to be centered. And it seems if you reposition adhesive relatively quickly before it cures, it's easier to move. I also put some double-sided adhesive on that watch part, which came from the die-cut ephemera that came with the Box of the Month Club. And then I had made a little bow with that same twine just to connect it all together. Put a little dab of glue on that clock, and there is my card. Now again, I'm using my stamping platform and inking up my stamp with some brown walnut stain. This one is, "I'm not crazy, my reality is just different from yours." Isn't that a great sentiment? I mean, if anyone loves Alice in Wonderland, you know that's where it comes from, obviously. And that applies for so many things. I decided to try a little bit of blue just because the paper I'm putting this on was going to have some blue in it. And I really wasn't happy with how it came out, so I just re-inked over it with the walnut stain. Now this paper has the hats, it's got cards in it, it's got the watch, and I just liked how that all came together. I put that on the card. I end up going back a little bit and inking around the bottom of that patterned paper. I put down my sentiment. I already had put on my dimensional adhesive. and center it on the top. And then they had in the ephemera kit these strips that are great for borders. I was playing around with the flower and just decided it just didn't work. So I left that border down at the bottom, but I inked around it a little bit on the pattern paper just so that die cut border would stand out, and I added dimensional adhesive behind it. And for this third card, I did something a little different. I used clear embossing powder and Versamark on the label, and the label was just plain off-white. And then I inked really heavily just so it sort of was a reverse image. What is the light color was where I used the heat embossed sentiment. Then I took a little piece of cloth and wiped it off just so it would show a little bit easier. And then I inked around the edges of this paper. The paper just didn't have a big pattern. It was more muted, and I sort of liked the look for this card. After I inked up the edges to my liking, I took some of the ink and just spread it out on my surface, spritzed some water on it, and took a paintbrush and just made it really wet, and just used the paintbrush to add some splatters on the paper. It just helped define that area. I tried to keep it centered, so when I put the sentiment on there, it showed a little bit more. It dried and matched with the paper fabulously. It doesn't look as dark once it's all done. Yeah, it really lightened up once it dried. So I go ahead and add some dimensional adhesive that, center it to the top, and add a little key, and there you go. And those are the cards I made using the Meet Me in Wonderland paper pad from the box of the month from Not Too Shabby, and the sentiment stamps that went with the set. And I also used some of the die cut ephemera. And that's what I have for you today. Hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and have a fabulous day.